Hello, everybody. This is Heather Alderman, Executive Director of COSMA. And to continue our training series this fall, I'm going to talk about principles 1 through 3 of the self-study writing and preparation process. So when would you be ready to start writing your self-study? Well, you would already have an agreed upon outcomes assessment plan, and this is agreed upon with yourself, your program, and the Board of Commissioners. You would have collected at least a year of data, and certainly you may have collected data for many years, adjusted your plan. We're just looking for that 1 year of data that you'll put as a snapshot in this document. We know which programs are to be included or excluded from this accreditation process. And I talk about a lot of that really with the candidacy status training. You are able to put forward the time and effort it takes to write this document. You know, you're delegating some of the information out, you're collecting data from people. And what you will put into this document, the body of it, is from the accreditation principles and self-study preparation manual. You are answering all of the self-study guideline questions. Each principle has a written portion, a description. Sometimes there's a little bit of background, and then there are self-study guideline questions, and that's what you're writing. That's the substance. So these are the 7 accreditation principles. I will be talking just about the top 4, and then next week I will be talking about the final 3. All right, so principle 1 is outcomes assessment, and here I have included the wording of the principle. So this is the ideal. This is the when you are doing the perfect job, which of course nobody is. This is what it looks like. That you are creating and implementing an outcomes assessment process where you have identified student learning outcomes, you have identified operational effectiveness goals, you have identified ways in which you're going to measure them, you have collected that data, and then you have analyzed it, and you have implemented or talked about changes that you might propose. And then you are seeing the impact of any of those changes by collecting additional data and analyzing that. You are considering if there is any budget implication to the changes you're proposing, and you are including that into maybe some strategic planning, maybe some budgeting processes, and you're documenting what happened as a result of all of this closing of the loop. So that's a big task. That's a multi-step task and a multi-time period task. So these are, of course, in very small font, but these are the self-study guidelines that you are answering in this self-study document. So in general, you are including this outcomes assessment plan. So it has more details in it than I have discussed here. I do discuss in depth how to put together an outcomes assessment plan in the candidacy status training. And then as you have understood from reading that the actual wording of the principle itself, there are elements that you will be discussing in the self-study guidelines here. So you have identified benchmarks. You're going to talk about whether they were met, exceeded, not met, and why. There are a couple of elements of the outcomes assessment plan that I didn't talk about in detail here, but you're going to talk about them, the basic skills and personal development. And then you are going to also talk about your operational effectiveness goals, which are for your program as a whole. They are academic unit level goals. They're not about student learning outcomes. And then, as said here, you are talking about the summary changes, a summary of the changes and improvements that you've identified, et cetera. And then you are closing the loop. So this is how the principle itself is sort of actualized into the self-study guidelines. And this is what you're putting in your document. So the Board of Commissioners, who is the body that makes the accreditation decisions, are going to look at this principle and really focus on it because it is the cornerstone of this accreditation process. So they are going to look at your student learning outcomes, how they're worded, and look at the measurement tools and make sure that they are measuring the student learning outcomes. They're looking at your analysis of the data that you have. You know, did you really look at it and analyze what you think is going on based on the data? And then they're looking to see that you are not just putting that data out there and saying, well, here we are, we made our benchmarks, but you know, what does that mean to you? Does that require or maybe give you a sense that you should be adjusting anything? And if so, what is that? How long will it take? You know, what are the budget implications, et cetera? And they're looking at that whole loop closing process. So this sounds easy, or maybe it doesn't sound easy, but it is, it can be complicated and challenging. For some, it is difficult to write really succinct and measurable student learning outcomes. This is just because there are different ways to do it. There's not really a right or a wrong way to do it. What can be complicating is if you are trying to measure many things in one student learning outcome. You could do that, but you actually need to do it instead of only measuring one part of the SLO. So either you separate it into different outcomes, or you would need to be very clear about, you know, I'm measuring this verb to analyze, and here I'm measuring this verb to you know, in another way, and you will be breaking up data accordingly. And you also must have rubrics that measure the student learning outcomes. And sometimes nobody has taught you how to write a rubric, or you're using an old rubric. So that's part of this process, is developing that rubric, making sure that it's measuring what you want it to measure. What we don't want to see in the outcomes assessment plan is any reference to grades, you know, the A, B, C, D, or whatever nomenclature is used at your institution. We want to see more, say, percentages. You know, 80% of students, you know, got 100% on this rubric, or you know, all students got 85% or higher on this rubric. So maybe that's a B, maybe it's an A. You know, that's not what we want to see. We want to understand that percentage. We do also want to make sure that you understand, in your use of direct and indirect measures, what the difference is between the two of those. We do have some very basic requirements for the number of each of those types of measurements you're supposed to have. And so we're looking for that, and then we're seeing, you know, how did you maybe go above and beyond that, and that you understand the difference. And then we want to look at, and I will be talking about principle 2, which is strategic planning, how those operational effectiveness goals are linked to your strategic planning process. So this is a chance, and I talk about this often, to not reinvent the wheel, but to utilize something you already have. If you're already looking at goals for your academic unit, that sounds a lot like something you might have in strategic planning. That said, strategic planning often comes from the university or college, you know, and sort of trickles down to the department level. So have you used that system to help develop not only your own strategic plan, but your operational effectiveness goals? And how are you basically saving yourself time and energy by providing the information that multiple people want to see? So they're looking for those connections. And they do want to know how any of the changes that you propose are linked again to budgeting and other planning and closing the loop. So I think I've said that enough there, but this is what's challenging within this system. So that's pretty short there, explanation, but as I said, a lot more detail into how to develop the plan would have happened already in your candidacy status process. And so I recommend you go back to that training to get more information about that. All right, principle 2 is about strategic planning. So this goes together hand in hand with outcomes assessment work. So even though you may have never done strategic planning at the academic unit level, we are asking you to do this, and we want it to actually be a formalized approach. We're not we're not just saying do whatever you want. We actually have some specific minimum requirement of elements that need to be a part of it. That said, we honor and recognize whatever strategic planning processes you're already involved in or need to line up with. So we know that that's possibly out there and or is out there. So we want you to make sure that you're aligned there. And so if you have goals that you have to work on, what we would ask you to do with those goals then is to turn them into a sport management academic unit specific goal. So certainly if you're working on graduation rates and retention or something like that, you know, that would be just for your students that you would write that goal. So here are the required elements I just mentioned. You will already have a mission of your academic unit because that's something that is a part of your outcomes assessment plan. But that is, of course, then a guiding set of ideas about what you want your students to know or be able to do when they are completed, you know, when they've completed the degree. And then there are certain sort of explanations and written elements that we call a profile that would give the history of your program. It could be long, lengthy, you know, moving from department to department. It could be that it just started a few years ago, et cetera. And then you would do some sort of a SWOT or pest analysis. It could be not those two, but something similar. Just, you know, what are your strengths, what opportunities exist, et cetera. We want to know who has been involved in the development of this plan. So in this area, we're indicating that you need to include some stakeholders in the development of this plan. And then as you've developed your goals based on, you know, your institution, your college, your department, et cetera, we want you to set up some sort of a tracking mechanism. It could be something you're already having to do, maybe even within the learning management system at your university, but something that will list the goals, list the other components of how you would track any movement or change or deadlines involved in your strategic planning goals. It's supposed to be helpful. You know, if you have something that you do, but it doesn't quite look like what's described here, we would talk about that because of course we would want you to use what's useful to you, not something imposed upon you. And then what we want to do is see that you have included, and how this is included is going to be quite variable, but how have you included data from your student learning outcomes and or information from that outcomes assessment plan, plus those operational effectiveness goals into this strategic plan. And then we don't just want you to have a plan and then, you know, you say goodbye to it for 7 years, but how did this process go? Is it useful? You know, what is it used for? You know, how do you use it? So here are the guidelines that you will be answering. So when you have your fully developed strategic planning document, which will be in the appendix, but which will be based on at least those elements that I outlined on the previous slide. Now you're going to really analyze this process. So we're asking you to talk about how it's linked to your institutional strategic planning and budgeting process. We also want to understand how your participation in this accreditation process and just how your department is structured that would allow for succession planning. So people come, people go, processes like this one remain. So how does that get communicated in the event that there either is somebody else that is going to take charge of this process or that somebody leaves? So we ask you about that. And then we want to know, if you have been around a while, you'll know that we used to have 8 principles and one of them was called educational innovation, but we've woven that into most of the other principles. So in self-study guideline number 4 here, we're asking you to let us know about the institution's orientation toward innovation and how that might be woven into any of the strategic goals that you have, maybe based on the institution, or maybe you have your own that you included there. So we want to know that there is room for that and that it is thought out and is something that will strategically guide choices that you make within changes you might make in your program. And then we want to know how this process has gone for you. Is it effective? It's okay to say that it hasn't been that effective. We would want you to think about that so that you could indicate what you might do to make it more effective and useful to you. All right, principle three. Principle three is curriculum, and it has these 6 components. So you might think I'm buzzing right through these slides, but the next couple of principles do have multiple components. So that's why, so there will be more to come. But this principle is about your curriculum. So you can see what we're going to talk about here. For many programs who do not have graduate degree programs, you get to skip 3.5 and 3.6. So hopefully that's exciting and fun. Program design basically means that the way that you have organized your program in terms of its curriculum should be according to the current acceptable practices in this academic community of sport management professors. So that doesn't necessarily change much. Sometimes general ed requirements, for example, do change within an institution, and how you approach all the courses you're going to have your students take is going to change. But generally, you would be using current information to make those decisions. So, there are different ways to present your curriculum. It could be more traditional face-to-face. It could be in a hybrid method or online. We certainly are all familiar with that now after 2020. So we want to just learn a little bit about how you're delivering the program. So here are the questions that you would be answering in this principle. Some of this can be cut and paste from a catalog or a website. So it gets complicated maybe if there is a change from one year to a next, or you've got a lot of different pathways that a student can take once they complete certain core requirements, with concentrations or specializations or tracks. So you would just include all of that. This is not really a principle where you're doing something wrong. You're just outlining for us what it is that you do. And, we can get to know your program better and understand what its priority is and how you got there. You talk about by what methods you are delivering these degree programs. And then you are doing some of that. It's kind of boring, I guess, but just description of how exactly a unit of academic credit is determined at your institution. And that is very specific sometimes to a particular institution. Sometimes it's the same as many others, but you talk about what that means and is that different depending on the delivery method, if that's an issue. So the point of that is, of course, to make sure that there's kind of a quality assurance process across delivery methods. And then you would also talk about how many semester or quarter hours of academic work is mandated so that to get a different type of degree. So the reason why there actually are 7 self-study guidelines, but the last 4 there are split out between the different degree levels. So for those degree levels that you don't have, you wouldn't answer that question. You would say it was not applicable. All right, the next principle under curriculum is the common professional component area. And this is, these areas do undergo a bit of revision every 5 years or so from COSMA itself, but this is the current list of these common professional component areas. This is only applicable to the associate's and bachelor's degrees because the graduate degrees, the master's or doctoral degrees, do not have any particular area requirements like this. So I think one of the bigger questions for this is that you don't have to meet each area the same, or we certainly don't expect that. There will be some areas where you'll have more contact hours than other areas, and that's normal and expected. So this is a bit of a complicated principle. It takes some work to put it together. And what I've heard and what I have seen is that it's a great exercise to really understand what the content of your courses are, because they have names like sport marketing, but you talk about a lot of other things in sport marketing as well, many other of the common professional component areas, undoubtedly. So what we ask you to do is take all of your sport core classes, so all of the required classes that are focused on sport management, and you take the syllabus for each of those classes and you transpose the topic areas into what we call an abbreviated course syllabus. And each of those areas is one of those common professional component areas. So you go through side by side your syllabus and you are saying, okay, the first week we talk about marketing, so I'm going to count that as marketing, but we also use a lot of international examples, so I'm also going to count that as international. So you are double counting, you are triple, quadruple counting in some instances. So the number of FaceTime contact hours we have with students is not going to match necessarily the number of the hours here that you're counting for these common professional component areas. We have samples for this because, of course, it is complicated to just talk about, but easier to see and then to try to do it. And the point is to really analyze your syllabi consistently across syllabi. You can certainly spread it out between different faculty, but just ensure, like inter-rater reliability, that they each are analyzing the syllabi in a similar way or per similar instructions. So once you have finished all of your abbreviated syllabi, there are numbers that you then will transfer into this beautiful table, which I believe is on the next page. No, it isn't. Okay. Anyway, it's in our principles document. But you will start to fill in this table, and you will then add up all the numbers in each of the CPC areas, and then you will be able to see what you really are teaching, what content areas you're really teaching. So then you would talk about what that means to you. So are there any areas that are low, either expected or unexpected? You know, what does that mean? We provide some guidance as to the range of contact hours we're looking for, and it ranges from about 15 to 60. So it's broad, and there will be areas that you far exceed that. And generally, I have not seen a lot of programs that really go below 15. It could happen. It's not a terrible thing. It can be justified or it can be adjusted. You know, that may be just a sign that that area does need some more attention in your program. So you can, if you have other courses beyond the core that are required, you can include those as well. Or you can create sort of multiple tables where you're including other classes that are required by all students, but maybe taught, say, in business, like accounting or finance, something that's could be possibly counted in this table. And you're just providing reasons or justifications for what you're including that might go beyond that sport core. And that's okay. You don't have to add those in. It's sometimes is just an interesting thing for you to see. And also you're trying to show what really your students are learning, you know, and that might involve adding some other courses. We do have an innovations column. So there will be classes or topics that may not be part of that CPC table right now. And we, as a accrediting body, don't really want to just keep adding and adding, you know, analytics and esports. We will be changing our CPC table as we need to, or our CPC areas as we need to. But in general, you know, things are coming and going, and we want to know what you're doing that is innovative. So this is where you could do that. In that column. You're not required to even complete that column if you don't want to, or you don't feel like there's anything that warrants it. All right, so again, look at the CPC table example in the principles document. It is not very fun to put on a slide, so I may have removed it. All right, the next principle under curriculum is just to ask about general education. And then this depth and breadth of curriculum, really what that is making sure that in your either in your associate's degree or your bachelor's degree, there's just a minimum number of the total number of credits that are sport management content hours. And of course, there's a little wiggle room there. Just if you are in, say, a business college and you have a business core as well, if you have 18% sport management course percentage, that may be justifiable. So just know that you can do that. So here are the guidelines for what you're going to respond to for this general education depth and breadth area. It's very straightforward, I think. What are the general education requirements? This table that you're putting in is really just to show what percentage each area comprises that total number of credits. So for example, you have gen ed, that's say 30%. You have your sport core, that's another 40%. And then you have some other electives or requirements beyond the core that would make up the final percentage to come to, the total number of credit hours. So that's what you're doing. If you do have any variations or anything you need to explain, you're given the opportunity to do that. And then we ask about some students need some additional kind of remedial programming for math, writing, that kind of thing. So how do you manage that, and how do you get them up to speed so that they can be successful in your program? All right. Next, we ask about how you are keeping your curriculum current and relevant. What kinds of processes do you have to review it and to make changes? And sometimes that is based upon what you're finding in your outcomes assessment plan. Not always, but sometimes. So we want to know if that data collection you're doing in Principle 1 is leading you to adjust where, when, or how you're teaching some different concepts. And we definitely just want to know that this is a regular activity that you have. Maybe it's mandated by your university. Maybe it is mandated, but you want it to happen more frequently. So you have some wiggle room there in how you want to address this. But we definitely want to know how you do it. So you will be talking about how this works. It could be that you are able to cut and paste some of the rules around how this works within your institution. And then we're asking you to talk about, this is a pretty key, the underlined word there, continuous. We want to know how, and another word for this would be regular. What is the regular mechanism by which you're evaluating your curriculum? Is it when you talk about your outcomes assessment plan data? Is it at your annual faculty retreat? Is it when your advisory board meets? And you don't have to have an advisory board. That's just something that is common and effective. So how do you do that? We want you to involve various stakeholders, which is why we are asking in B and D or B and C who's involved and what their role is. So if you're not involving certain stakeholders, this is the hint that maybe you ought to. And how you do that, of course, is up to you. All right, if you have a master's degree, then in general with this principle and then the one about the doctoral curriculum, which is 3.6, you are providing similar information that you would for a bachelor's degree. So as you can see under the self-study guidelines, number 1, you're giving quite general information about the curricular requirements for your master's degree. And then you are also providing syllabi for them and talking about, while you're not going to be covering all the CPC areas, but what if you have students that have been admitted who did not have a sport management undergraduate degree? Is there some mechanism to help them get up to speed with some of that basic information? And so we also hope and assume that you have some sort of practical or experiential learning for those master's degree students. Many of them, of course, are perhaps adults that are already in jobs. How does that all work together? And then how do you, especially if you're in a program where you have both undergraduate and master's students or degree programs, how are you ensuring that there is, a different level of work, depth, and understanding for those master's degree students? And of course, you would be including different student learning outcomes for that level, that would measure them at a different level. So that's where these two things kind of connect together, just so that you can see that there's still a connection back to outcomes assessment. And then similar questions for the doctoral program. We do go into a little bit more detail about who's advising you. Is there a dissertation manual? How long does it take students generally to go through the program? That kind of, are there research requirements, teaching, instruction and pedagogical instruction and requirements, that sort of thing. So similar, a little bit more in depth, at a different level, of course, than the other programs. All right, and here we are at Principle for Faculty, which has these 5 components. So we're almost there. Yeah, we're almost there. Okay, so faculty qualifications. So this is the principle here that we would expect that the better programs have highly qualified faculty. What we are very flexible about is who you hire and what areas of expertise they have, what actual terminal degree they have. And sometimes you are in a position where somebody with a lower terminal degree would be a great asset to your program, and we want to make that possible. We especially would want anybody teaching who has some sport industry experience to be able to do that as well. So there's quite a bit of flexibility here. We're going to be looking at the CVs for all of the full and part-time sport management faculty. And if you have other faculty on your campus that are teaching in your program, even if they're not in your academic unit or your department, those individuals would be included as well. They'll be, of course, scrutinized according to what they're teaching, not, in the overall picture. And then we want to make sure that the information you're providing us about faculty qualifications is accurate. So we do ask that you show us where that's stated in any on your website or on an intranet or something like that. And then we have a table asking about the qualifications of all full and part-time faculty. And so that just gives you that bigger picture of who's teaching with us, what are they focused on, and how does that fit into our curricular needs. And if there is anyone, you need to make sort of a rationale about why they're teaching what they're teaching, because it's maybe a little unique or specific or seemingly outside of their expertise in some way or another. You are able to provide a rationale for that. So it is definitely up to you to show it, but we are trying to be very inclusive. Here's what this faculty qualifications table looks like. So it's just a nice summary of who you have in your program and what they might be covering. All right, 4.2, faculty load. So you have a lot of responsibilities. You have a lot of different areas that you're working in, aside from teaching, service, scholarly activity, et cetera. So we want to ensure that based on the rules at your institution, that there's not an excessive amount of teaching or course preparations, or that teaching load is reasonable as it comes to the other professional responsibilities that you have. And those responsibilities do include managing this accreditation process and possibly other accreditation processes. So all of this is, of course, dependent upon the institutional focus, where you are and what's required of you and what those rules are. So this principle asks you to spell all of that out so that can be clear to the Board of Commissioners. So you would include the typical teaching load of your full-time faculty. And then there is a table where you show your teaching load and the student credit hours that what that looks like. And that's just another helpful way to put it in a diagram so you can see what's really going on. You would break it down by the faculty qualification level, the degree level, and the different semesters or quarters, whatever it's divided into. And then you would talk about whether there's any deviation in the amount of student credit hours that you're responsible for, and what what the rules are, and then what you're actually doing. And of course, we recognize that there is overload, but how far are you into that? So we're really just comparing the rules at your institution versus what's happening in real time. And then we are asking you about any reductions you might have in your teaching load for your other professional responsibilities, including this accreditation process, but there are others. And then we want to know how any internship supervision and advising are handled. And of course, those are huge time elements to what you're doing. So this is a complex principle in reality, because there are a lot of, it's really putting together so many aspects of what you do. And it's an opportunity to say, this is a lot, we really need some help. It could be administrative help, it could be advising help, it could be the management of internship placement help, it could be teaching help, could be a lot of different elements, or maybe some combination thereof. So number 7 here in the self-study guidelines at the bottom is saying, this is your chance to say, this is how we think all of the resources that we have in terms of our faculty, this is how it's working, this is how it's functioning. This is how it's either sufficient or not sufficient, and in what areas. So it's your chance to really explore that and talk about it, and think about it in terms of the growth or the change in your program that you are wanting or are actually planning for and describing in your strategic planning. So this is, again, another connection back to some of the other principles. Here's that fancy table. So you can see the faculty members separated by how they are participating in your program. And you put your student credit hour numbers here. And for different semesters, you can always divide it into quarters, as I said. And then, of course, you can eliminate whatever columns are not a part of your degree if you don't have those degree levels. So you can have a less confusing table. All right, here is the, I talked about this faculty coverage summary, I believe. Well, this is 4.3 program coverage. So this is taking data from that previous table and putting it into this one here so that you can see what percentage at what qualification level your faculty are teaching. And there's not really any wrong answer here. It's something for you to notice. And you can see that we do want to make sure that the say at the doctoral level that faculty have are qualified at the doctoral level to teach those students. But again, it's not, there's not a lot of wrong here. It's just more to show you what you have. Here's the next table where you are talking about, you are showing how the faculty in your program are covering those CPC areas. So again, that's only for the undergraduate level degree programs, but the CPC areas here are listed on the left, and then you would indicate which full-time faculty member is in charge of that area, at what level are they qualified, and then what degree program do they teach in. So it's just another check and balance there with what we're trying to put together in terms of faculty qualifications and what you're teaching. All right. One other element of this principle is, of course, the evaluation of faculty. So in general, we want you to have some sort of formal system. It should be outlined by your institution, and we will ask you to provide the copies of that. Some, of course, evaluation parts are less formal, and we would want you to describe those as well. But it's just to get an understanding that of what your institution does and how it happens, and just to ensure that it is actually having and that it's appropriate. So again, you are given the opportunity to talk about the degree to which that's working for you, and that it is helpful and is really helping your program be the best that it can be. So you have that opportunity to talk about that. All right, and then last in this principle is fairly straightforward. There are policies, of course, that guide what you can or can't do or are required to do as a faculty person. And also you are to be given some sort of pathway to develop your pedagogical knowledge and skills, research, etc. So likely in your institution, there are things that you can do in that area. We want to know what those resources are. And of course, you might be gaining some professional development elsewhere or by doing different activities. So we want to know about that as well. So you are providing really probably a link to your faculty handbook because those can be very large and unwieldy. You can also, if there's a PDF that you would provide, you can even include that as a separate attachment from the any other when you're submitting your self-study document, the other documents that you are including. You can just have that be separate because it can be large and unwieldy, but you're talking about what that faculty development program is, how you might actually apply for funding, if you need to do that or how it's allocated. And you want to talk a little bit about what has been happening in the recent period and who participated and how that was. And then you're going to, again, talk about how that is effective, contributes to academic quality in your program. And you can even include ways in which you would like it to improve or what could be changed. So again, this is a self-reported, self-reflective element for you to really expand on it as you wish. And then we do want to know, this is getting to that weaving of that educational innovation, but what is going on in the classrooms in recent times that you think is innovative? Maybe it's not something you thought of as innovative until you were asked this question. Maybe you aren't sure if the things you're doing are innovative or not. So again, not a right or wrong answer, but something to reflect on and to make a note of. And then that is a discussion that you can have if you feel like you need a little more help in it. You can get some help from your site visit team. You can get help from the Board of Commissioners. Or maybe you don't know what to identify. And then, an objective or more objective individual reading your document and talking to you on a site visit could help you identify that which you're already doing, which is innovative. All right, that is principles 1 through 4. I'll have 2 more sessions this month in October 2024, finishing out the writing of the self-study document, the remaining 3 principles, and then a session on preparing for the site visit. So already on our website, we have the candidacy status focus already up on the website for anybody to read. So I do have a couple of people here that are listening, so I'll see if they have any questions or comments. All right. All right, thanks everybody for coming. And I'll see you next week.